Have you ever heard yourself say, I know my law enforcement officer is struggling, but I just don't know where to start? Or have you ever thought, I know they need to see a clinician, but honestly, it's not quite in the budget right now. How in the world are we going to afford it? I think we've all been there, which is why I'm so excited for today's episode, revealing a resource that is available to you at absolutely no cost, but a huge reward. First Responders Bridge was formed as a stepping stone for spouses and family just like you. I'm so excited to introduce you to today's guest on the Code 44 podcast. Mick Yinger brings more than 21 years of law enforcement experience, serving both the Clinton Township, Ohio Police Department and the City of Columbus Division of Police. But the reason I invited Mick to join us today on Code 44 is because he is one of the original founders of First Responders Bridge. Based in Columbus, Ohio, but serving first responders nationally, was created to be a true first step, a safe place where first responders and their spouses can attend a weekend retreat surrounded by people who have lived this life and truly understand it. The bridge has established itself as a powerful starting point for helping first responders and their families begin processing the trauma that accumulates over a career. There are countless success stories that have come out of this program, and I'll let Mick share a little bit more about those today. Thank you, Mick, so much for joining our episode today of Code 44. Tell me a little bit about your personal journey.
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me. It's always great to be able to get the word out about the bridge, and just really appreciate that. I retired from the Columbus Police Department. My whole family are police officers. I think there's 8 or 9 of us that either were or ended up being police officers. So a couple of us work together. It's really cool. It's kind of like blue
Wow.
blood. But I retired in 2012. Had 3 vertebrae fused together. And then I was living in Virginia. My wife and I, my son was going to Liberty University. We were living in Southern Virginia. I just loved it, near Smith Mountain Lake. And on February 10th, 2018, we lost 2 Westerville police officers were murdered when responding to a 911 hang-up call. Westerville is a suburb of Columbus. I grew up in Westerville. My wife and I went to school there. I worked a lot of cases with those guys and came back for the funeral, and the funeral just wrecked me and just really hit me hard. And I tell people, I think it was because I was retired. I didn't have that shield up that we do as first responders to kind of protect ourselves, and it just really hit me hard. And that's kind of where the idea of the bridge came about.
Wow. Yeah, I can't imagine. No one can ever prepare yourself for something like that, especially in law enforcement. You always have risk, but you never really feel like it's going to happen to you. And I remember that day. I remember it very clearly. I live about 100 miles west of Columbus, Ohio, but I remember it being all over the news. I imagine that definitely led you into focusing more on the mental health of first responders, because I'm sure you're seeing a lot of your past coworkers, peers dealing with a lot of struggles. So, what it led you really into more of the mental health?
I didn't really I never really paid attention to mental health. I was working, I was doing the job. I mean, we were in the middle of it. And the day after the funeral, I'm driving down 270, the outer belt of Columbus, with my son, and he threw in a CD, "Some Gave All" by Billy Ray Cyrus. And as I'm looking out the window, I start thinking about just all the hurt that was taking place at the funeral. I've had 2 former partners and close friends die by suicide. I had a former academy classmate take his life. I was forced to take someone's life out of a shooting, so I know, not only what the person goes through, but I know what the family goes through. And it just kind of hit me. And so I told my son Noah, I said, "Call Pav and tell him we're coming over." And Mike Pavlino is been my best friend since the 7th grade. He had just retired from the Westerville Police Department when this happened as a detective and a SWAT team leader, and he did 4 tours overseas as a chief warrant officer, 3 in the Army. And so we go to Pav's house. He opens the door and I said, I want to start a nonprofit and help first responders dealing with all the crap that we go through. And he said, okay. And so we sat at his kitchen table and we just started putting pen to paper. And we didn't know what we're going to do yet, but we know that we have to start with the foundation of four things. The first thing is we knew that we had to include the spouses and significant others because you guys walk with us every step of the way, even when we don't let you.
Hmm.
Second, we knew we had to include dispatchers and corrections officers because they often get forgotten when you think about first responders. And like I said, I didn't think about mental health in any capacity when I was on the job, especially what they go through.
Yeah.
And then third, I knew that we wanted our attendees to hear the name of Jesus at every retreat. They're going to hear from a couple of speakers. They're going to talk about what helped them get through some of their traumatic events, both on and off the job. And we tell them ahead of time, look, if you don't feel comfortable sitting in those sessions, you certainly don't have to. But it was something we felt called to do. And then lastly, we knew that if the bridge was led by me and him, it would fail within the first year. We had no nonprofit background, no mental health background. And so we knew we had to put a good team around us. And that's probably the best thing that we've done since starting the bridge.
What a story. Something that you said resonates so much because as I'm going through this podcast and interviewing all sorts of people, both past law enforcement as well as spouses of law enforcement, the common theme that you hear is we just didn't think about it. We just did our job and we just pushed it down and we just kept moving on. And I hear that in my own spouse, Mike. He just says, we're trained to run into it and you do your job and you go on to the next one. And so it's such an undertaking of all of the things that you guys must be feeling in that moment. So you talked a little bit about starting and why you started. Was there a moment where you realize that families and responders needed just something different that they just didn't have exposure to?
We'd heard about Save a Warrior. And so we got together with some of the people with Save Warrior and learned about their organization, what they were doing. We got together with PCIS and Steve Click and their team over there at Ohio Assist and found out what they were doing. So what we did is we said, let's be that first step. Our retreats are educational and informative. It's a pretty intense weekend, but it's not as intense as PCIS, and it's certainly not as intense as Save Warrior. We're kind of that first step, letting them know they're not alone when we with the significant others. We don't want you guys to go through what we go through, so we keep that stuff bottled up inside. So we may tell you some things, but that's not healthy. And we talk about communication at the retreats, and we talk about how much do you really want to know because
Hmm.
some significant others want to know everything and others just very superficial, and we talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit more about First Responders Bridge. Who is it for specifically?
Yep, it's for all active and retired first responders and their significant other, and we classify first responders as law enforcement, anyone with arrest powers. It could be game wardens, law enforcement, federal law enforcement, firefighters and EMS, corrections officers, and that could be whether with the sheriff's department or with the prison, and then dispatchers, and then significant others. Depending on the retreat, we're right around 65% to maybe 70% of our attendees bring a significant other, but certainly not all of them.
So, do you feel that this is for people who have been a first responder for a long period of time? Or do you also encourage people that are maybe just starting their career?
Both. Now, I like when they come early, and you're starting to see that stigma change a little bit now that we're getting younger leadership in, and people are starting to, they've kind of been, brought up now. It's okay to talk about this stuff because when I came on, 1990, well, you didn't talk about this. I couldn't imagine one of my chiefs saying, "Hey, I'm struggling." Luckily, we have really, changed the culture, and it's still out there. There's still that stigma, and I think that's why we get so many people from other states is, or on the outskirts of Ohio because they realize if I drive, 3, 4 hours, I probably won't see anyone that I know, you know, and
Yeah,
we get a lot of that.
yeah, absolutely. When a first responder and a spouse are there at the retreat, what are they actually working on?
They go be working on different things depending on their situation. We have different speakers, we have different groups. Our goal is to provide them an expense-free retreat. We never want finances to be the reason they don't get the help that they need and deserve. We want it to be a safe, confidential environment where they're going to be helping them process traumas that they've experienced. We're seeing a lot of early childhood trauma. And then they go into either the military or first responder world or both, and the significant others as well. I think that's one of the big surprising things for significant others. They realize how much it actually helped them.
Mhm.
And then we help them build resilience because I heard a pastor say one time, we're either all coming out of a valley, getting ready to go into a valley, or you're in the valley. And so we want to give them resilience for them when those trials in life come up, because those runs are going to continue after a retreat, and we want things at home and all that are going to continue. And then we provide support post retreat as well.
I know you guys publish your agendas online. So, for anyone that is interested in reviewing what that looks like, I will post your website onto the description notes of this episode so that you can grab it there. But can you give maybe just some of examples of what type of speakers you bring in or what type of sessions that you are really keying in on?
Yep. So, and I'll kind of just break it down by day, probably the easiest. And the first day is really about letting them know they're not alone, that they're not the only ones feeling this, and that's half the battle. Tell them the first day, um, you know, 85% of first responders experience some symptoms related to mental health issues. Percent, and we're losing more first responders to suicide than all line of duty deaths combined. And so, when they realize that, okay, I'm not the only one going through this, you just see shoulders go down across the room because they realize, I'm not alone. And then we also they hear from those peer speakers, but then they hear about the brain, how the brain works, and how trauma affects the brain. And we have a testimonial video from a past attendee that we had from Indiana, and in there he says he had a suicide attempt, and he talks about that, but he talks about at the retreat they were showing two brains, one before trauma, one post trauma. And he says, I'm not crazy. The brains are
Mhm.
different. And he
Yeah.
says that in the testimonial. And this is an injury. This is something that happened to you. The end of the first day, we have a voluntary I rest meditation at the end of the night. It's very relaxing if they want to do that. And then Saturday morning, we have a voluntary chapel service. But then to start the day on Saturday from 9 a.m. to noon, we have discussion groups broken out by profession. There'll be two law enforcement groups, two fire and EMS groups, two significant other groups. We usually don't have enough corrections or dispatchers for their own group, but if we do them, they'll have their own group as well. It's an intense kind of discussion group, but we hear all the time it's the most powerful thing that we do. It's the best thing that at the retreat, I think. And so each one of those is led by a clinician, a chaplain, and a peer support person. And they just do a fantastic job. We don't force people to talk or anything, but what we find is, especially I'm always in one of the law enforcement groups, and I hear this all the time. People saying, I came into this, I wasn't going to say anything. But then they get in there and they just start talking. They get involved, yeah, here's what I'm going through. Here's what happened to me. But it's not counseling. It's kind of a peer support model. But then, later that day, we have tabletop discussions. We have a panel discussion and then a couple more speakers as well. And then we finish Saturday night with a comedian. Vinny Montez is a commander.
He's great. Yeah.
Yeah, he does our comedy shows. He's just a great guy. And Sunday's all about just kind of where the rubber meets the road, bringing everything back together, how to live relentlessly. And then we have a panel discussion of clinicians. We talk about different modalities that are out there. We talk about how to find the right clinician. We talk about all sorts of things with the clinician panel. But it's a long weekend. There's not a lot of downtime. We try to give them, an hour here, an hour and a half lunch here, and just to, let them decompress a little bit. A lot of information we want to get in there in a short amount of time.
Yeah, absolutely. So, something you just said. So, I'm going to speak to the spouses here for a minute. This is your hook. If you just tell your first responders that you're going to see a comedian show, you're going to see Vinny for the weekend, you're golden. Just get them there.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. A lady came up to me. So we're going into retreat number 22 now. we brought Vinny in starting retreat number 2. We found that we had to do something to lighten the day a little bit.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
a lady came up to me after that second retreat and thanked me she goes, "Thank you for bringing in Vinny. My husband hasn't laughed in years, and he just laughed the entire time." So,
I love that. That's a great
yeah.
story. Absolutely. I'm going to go back to something that you said because I think it's really important. As spouses, we also feel like we're alone, right? And you kind of touched on that. Is the reason why you bring in spouses is because we need to be aware of what's going on and we need to feel like we are not alone. And I 100% agree with you. And I have felt that way. And I think, the stigma also contributes to that because it's conditioned us to stay quiet, right?
Mhm.
Don't say anything, just be quiet. There's another thing, though, that I think we're also facing right now, which is as a spouse and maybe even as the first responder, we feel as if it's not going to happen to us, or it's not happening in my house, or my spouse is not depressed. And so I can just ignore it. Do you see that throughout the retreat of people coming in, maybe not aware at first, and then going, oh my goodness, I wasn't aware as to the magnitude that this was taking on my spouse?
Yeah, we hear it all the time. We hear everything from I couldn't imagine it would happen to us to they talk about infidelity in their groups and stuff, and that's why we keep them separated. We have their own
Mm-hmm.
spouse groups, and they have traumas from their lives. So we track performance outcome measures several ways. We do evaluation forms. We do a PHQ-4 uh, survey before the retreat, and then 2 weeks post retreat to see how much they've improved, and the significant others get their own. They don't answer for the first responders because they go through traumas of their own and just in life. And so we gear it very much towards the individual person. They get a lot out of it. But we hear that a lot as far as just, you know, our marriage isn't the same as from when he first started the job. And it's not gonna be. It's just when you add that much trauma
Yeah.
to your life, it's gonna change, but we want to give you healthy ways to deal with it.
Yeah, and what you just said a little bit ago, which is you showed a picture of the brain before the trauma and after the trauma, or during the trauma and after it was, processed. I don't think a lot of people realize the impact that trauma has on the nervous system and to the brain. If it was any other type of ailment, we would be rushing to the doctor to get it fixed, right? But for some reason, with mental health, it feels like we still classify it as emotions. It's just emotions that they're feeling. So I love the fact that you said, look at a picture. Look at a picture of someone who has trauma and then look at somebody's brain that doesn't. There is definitely a difference. And so I think the nervous system is what we need to put more emphasis on, and how your brain processes all that information as opposed to just, it's a feeling or it's emotion or it's how I feel.
And I think a lot of that's when they say post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, when you hear disorder, it's immediately a negative, and that's just a diagnosis in a book that they have to use for insurance purposes and things like that. But, that's why I like to talk about it being an injury, because this is something that happened to you. It's
Yeah.
not, the disorder thing kinda I don't care for that term. We don't use it we are talking about, an actual, diagnosis.
Yeah.
It's something that happened to you, and there's nothing and we took there's nothing wrong with you. You're having a normal human response to an abnormal situation that you dealt with, or just the complex traumas, the trauma
Yeah.
after trauma after trauma. There's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with.
Yeah, absolutely. You described a little bit about the environment, but I want to dig a little bit deeper there. I did a podcast with Steve Click on PCIS. It's very intimate. It's a small group. You're definitely going to have to speak up. You're going to have to talk. It's not like you can sit in the back of the room there. I believe first responder bridge is a little bit different. So explain a little bit more about that environment.
We have more attendees. We're usually anywhere from I try to keep it around 100 just to kinda keep it more personal, But, I think right now for the retreat here in a few weeks, we are like 122 right now. We'll get some cancellations. We always do, but we'll end up at maybe 210 on the 215.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, and so, but we have the discussion groups as well, like they do. It's not like I said, I don't think it's as intense, and it's made out to be. We all do something different between ourselves, Ohio Assist, and Save a Warrior, but that's okay. We all have the same goal. And yeah, it's they're going to hear from peer speakers. They're going to participate in discussion groups and panel discussions and things like that as well.
Yeah. I think at the beginning you said sometimes people can come in and communicate that they're going to sit in the back of the room and not participate. I know I've talked to a lot of spouses about different retreats, and sometimes they're having a difficulty getting their spouse into a retreat because it feels like I'm going to have to show up and I'm going to have to expose all of my dirty laundry. And so one of the things that you said is it's a bigger group. And so is it fair to say that maybe this can be a first step of just getting some exposure in maybe a larger group where they can maybe blend a little bit more until they feel a little bit more comfortable? Is that fair to say?
Absolutely, and that was our goal, when we met with the other groups, it's like, "Okay, let's be that first step, let's." That's why ours was a little more, educational and informative, and then the last day of our retreat, we put up slides and talk about Ohio Assist or, PCIS, and we talk
Yeah.
about Save a Warrior, and,
Yeah.
and we let them know how they can register for those,
Yeah.
take that next step, and we work closely together as far as that goes.
Yeah. So your name, Bridge, First Responder Bridge, truly is what you guys are meant to be, which is a bridge from maybe saying, I don't need help or I don't want to expose it to just that first step of maybe getting the introductory of understanding why things are happening to me or why I'm feeling the way that I feel. And then you guys are saying, okay, there's other resources that you can continue to work with. Is that a good
Yeah.
description?
Yeah, and there's so many different ways we use bridge. We kinda got lucky with that name, and, we're really happy about it, so.
It's a great name, great name, good job. Let's talk a little bit about cost because this comes up every conversation I have, and so I feel like we need to kinda scream it from the rooftops, right? On Mick, what is the cost to attend the bridge program?
The only thing that you pay for is the gas that it takes to get to and from the Marriott Northwest Hotel in Dublin. We pay for your lodging, we pay for your food, we pay for the speakers and clinicians that come from across the country. We pay for if you fly into Columbus, we have a car service pick you up at the airport and drive, they'll have your name on a sign and they'll take you to the hotel and get back again on Sunday because we want to take away all excuses. We don't want money to be a reason someone doesn't get the help that they deserve. And one thing you'll notice at our retreats, this kind of goes back to the environment I think you were asking about. We call it retreat. It's not a conference. And we don't have people vendors tables and all there. This is all about you. This is all about you getting the help that you need. We A lot of our speakers have written books. We don't allow them to bring them in and sell them. This is all about your healing. Now we provide a QR code to our attendees when they get there, which has the agenda, has resources, and if they want to buy one of our speakers' books, they can. But we want this to be non-transactional. This is all about you and your healing.
Yeah, this is a resource, right? This is removing a barrier that we hear, which is I don't know where to go and or it costs too much. So I'm going to reiterate what you just said because I think it's critically important for all the spouses today to hear, which is there's no cost associated with this. The hotel is paid for. The meals are paid for. If you're flying in, the transportation is paid for. All you physically have to do is to get to Columbus, Ohio, and the rest is taken care of. And even entertainment, like Vinny and a comedian, like you really cannot have that as an obstacle. The only thing you need to do is to get your loved one there, and then First Responder Bridge does the rest. What do you want families to know before they say yes? Is there anything that you would want to reveal to them before a spouse goes to her significant other and says, hey, I really think we need to take a look at First Responder Bridge?
Just how much our team cares about you. the first responders, if they're having a hard time getting them to come, go to our website, look at our team. We've all done the job. We've been out there. We've walked the same steps you've taken. We've got just a fantastic team that's gonna really take care of you and love on you, and it's a welcoming environment when you get there. It's non-judgmental. It's confidential. I mean, I could have a chief call me and say, "Hey, did Joe come to the retreat?" You're going to have to ask Joe because we don't reveal that, and it's a confidential retreat. And then we'll hear every now and again from the first responders that what if I see someone I know? It's like, yeah, but they're there too.
Right.
And then it's brave to step out and say, you know what, I'm struggling. I need some help. I want to do this for not only for myself but for my family as well.
Yeah. That was powerful. Thank you. You said so much there that I think is important for spouses to know. First responders feel and accurately feel as if nobody understands the job except other first responders. And they're right. And so what you just said is we're here, we've all done it, we've all experienced it, we've had the same challenges. I do feel like maybe that brings a level of comfort to them because I know one of the biggest things with a first responder seeing a clinician, sometimes they feel like that clinician doesn't know. They've never been out on the road like me. And so you bringing them in with the experience, I think is so critical and so powerful. So talk a little bit about, you said knowing somebody there. Do you mix command staff and potentially someone's boss with everyone else?
Our retreats have anywhere from a chief to an officer. We are adding this year a command staff only retreat, and that'll be for anyone above the rank of an officer, a firefighter, a dispatcher. So it can be a corporal, a sergeant, all the way up to chief or sheriff. We've had several chiefs that have been there, and high ranking people at our retreats, and we tell them when we're in the discussion groups, like, we're all the same level. We're not, there's no rank in here. We don't play out the rank and all that. But we're here for all one goal, and that's to get better.
Absolutely. And I'll reiterate that. My husband is the sheriff of Hancock County, and if he went and saw somebody there that was on his department, he would be so encouraged and so proud of them, and not a negative thought, but a positive thought of you're doing the things that you need to do to take care of you. It's like the shame needs to go away. When we go to the doctor because our arm hurts or because our tooth hurts, there's no shame in that, in the same manner of there really should be no shame on the mental health as well.
And we try to keep them, like, if we have somebody from Clark County, maybe two people, we'll have one of them in the one discussion group and the other one in another. We try to keep them separate, just so as much as we can to make it so more comfortable for them. But obviously, we can't always do that.
Yeah.
But we try to do
Yeah.
that as much as we can because we want them to be comfortable. We want them to feel free to reach out and to get help.
Yeah. Yeah. And to have that real experience. You are located in Columbus, Ohio, but who do you serve?
We serve all first responders, significant others.
Okay.
I mean, we've had people. So we've had just over 2,000 people attend our retreats from 41 different states and from 86 of the 88 counties in Ohio. And
That's
so we
fantastic.
get just incredible. We've had people from Alaska to Florida to California to Massachusetts. We get a lot of NYPD. We get a lot of people from Texas, and then of course the surrounding states. And again, I think that a lot of that is I can jump on a plane and be there in 3 hours and won't see anyone I know.
Yeah. And to reiterate, you just got to get the plane ticket here. The rest is covered. So
The rest is
that's
covered.
awesome. That's awesome that you're seeing that. And, I think that reinforces that this isn't a Columbus, Ohio or Findlay, Ohio issue. This is a national issue that law enforcement, first responders are experiencing. So I love that you've got people traveling in from everywhere. That's fantastic.
We didn't know what to expect. Our first retreat that we did, if we would have had 20 people register, we would have been ecstatic. And
Yeah.
we had 91 people from 5 states.
That's fantastic. So, up to this point, we've really been focused on First Responder Bridge, which is the weekend you come. It's 3 days. Is that correct?
Yep, we start on a Friday.
Okay.
Registration starts at 10 or 11. as registration. We get kicked off at 1:30 on Friday, and we're out of there by noon on Sunday. And so
Okay.
give them time to travel. If they are flying into Columbus, or if they're driving from out of state, like Kentucky, Indiana, whatever, we will pay for a room for them on Thursday,
Okay.
so they don't have to miss any of the retreat travel. And so we get a lot of people take advantage of that.
Outstanding. Great. When you and I talked last, you revealed to me a program that you have called Healing Bridge that I had no idea it was a service that was available. So, can you share a little bit about Healing Bridge?
Yeah, after you attend a retreat, we pay for 6 free counseling sessions post-retreat. We vetted clinicians all across the state of Ohio. They all have experience working with first responders. Our stresses are just too different. They have to go through our training. We ask that they do ride-alongs, or they sit with a dispatcher or fire engine, because we want them to have experience in trauma-related events and working with first responders. And so we pay for 6 free counseling sessions post-retreat for all of our attendees that from Ohio. There's an organization that we work with in Arizona that, if they're outside of the state of Ohio, they kind of have the same program as Healing Bridge, where they'll connect you with clinicians. So we'll refer them to them if they're out of the state. But we started this in mid 2024. And since then, we've paid for over 600 counseling sessions for our
Wow.
first responders and their significant other. It's either 6 for the first responder, 6 for the significant other, or 6 together we pay for. And the thing is, it's confidential again. I couldn't tell you anyone that's gone through our counseling thing. We get a redacted invoice and we pay it, and that's it. Confidentiality is so important to what we do. If first responders, you get
Yeah.
one chance.
Yeah.
And so we're really, really big on confidentiality.
That's so powerful. And I had no idea. So, just to kind of recap what you said, if you and your spouse come to the First Responders Bridge and spend the weekend there, and that's healing in itself, right? To
Yep.
get there, to go through that entire experience. I know from my experience, it was PCIS, but a similar format, like life changing for both Mike and I. But you guys don't stop there. So if you attend that event and you need continued support, you get 6 more sessions that are free. I think that's important because through my process here of Code 44 and the podcast, I've heard a lot of spouses and first responders say we're only allowed so many visits to counseling through our EAP, which is true. And it does get costly. But you guys are offering an extension which says, hey, you've got a weekend to kind of get you on the right track. And then here are 6 more sessions, 6 together or 6 individually for both spouse and first responder. So you guys should be proud of that. That's big. And if we're not taking advantage of that as spouses and family of first responders, then, shame on us, because that's an amazing resource you guys are providing. We are skeptical people. So, can you give some examples without sharing too much detail? But can you give any examples of healing that you've witnessed through this program?
Yeah, so many now that we hear. We have a flyer on Facebook at First Responders Bridge, and for our May retreat. And I just clicked on there. I read some of the comments, and I think there was like 5, 6 comments. We attended this from Oregon, and this is life changing. It just made me feel good because that was unsolicited. And I knew that a lot of your listeners are significant others. So I pulled up a testimonial I'd like to read here, if that's okay.
Yeah,
And
please. Yes.
this is from a significant other of a corrections lieutenant in Las Vegas. And she said, I have never been so blown away by an experience as I was attending the First Responders Bridge retreat. As the wife of a corrections lieutenant, I went into this event blind. My husband asked me to go, and truthfully, I never looked into what it was about. I just went to support my husband in something that he wanted to do. What I came to realize after the event, it was his way of telling me I need help. We sat in a room full of people, many of which were clearly at the ends of their rope, individually or as couples. Wives want to be let in. They want to be talked about. They want to be talked about the things going on with them. Husbands that don't want to talk because we just don't understand. The bridge I get it now, bridges the gap between first responders and significant others. It helps us understand the other's side, the other's perspective, but what the only one of many gifts that they give. The resources that they have, the wealth of knowledge, the drive and passion to help anyone that crosses their paths was so overwhelming. I've never seen anything like this. I feel like my words don't even come close to the impact I watched this retreat have on people, including us. People seeing that they're not alone. Thank you, Mick, and your outstanding team for your time and dedication to show the world not all hope is lost. So that kind of, obviously makes us feel good. We get several of those after each retreat. And then just kind of a story that um, a guy had reached out to us after one of the retreats, and he told us that he was going to give it the first day. His wife wouldn't come to the retreat with him, and he was going to give it the first day. And if he didn't feel like he had hope that he was going to take his life that night in the hotel room, he brought a gun with him. And by the grace of God, the way our team has the retreat set up and that first day, letting them know they're not alone, and we talk about the brain and things like that. He let us know that his marriage is now better than it's ever been. He volunteers with us now, and the retreat saved his life. And we realize just kind of how serious is the things that we're dealing with. Um, he volunteers with us now. I've had many of those. We had a guy did a testimonial video for us that we played the opening day of the retreat where he talks about a suicide attempt and how the bridge helped save his life.
So powerful. When you were telling those stories, I was getting emotional. It's kind of my story. I can resemble all the stories you shared with Mike and I's own story. And it's just so powerful, those retreats way beyond anyone's expectation. As the spouse wrote, she came just to support her significant other. And you just walk away with so much knowledge and so much information. And the story you shared about the guy that was going to give it one day and then commit suicide, like my heart, it hurts. They are hurting. And thank you so much for the work that you guys are doing and saving these first responders. I feel like that was kind of a mic drop, right? We should end there, but we got to keep going because we've got to talk about if people want to register, how do they do that?
They can go to firstrespondersbridge.org. Right now, we're registering for 2 retreats on our website, and then we're having one in July that we're registering for the command staff. We have retreats at the end of February, beginning of March, and then we have one in May, July, August, and then we don't have another one until December because we cannot have retreats during Buckeye football season. We
Football
did that
season.
one time, and we'll never do it again. So we'll kind of have a break there for retreats.
Our little push of go Buckeyes. Well, I'm going to ask you a question that I know that's probably on a lot of people's minds right now. Quite a few spouses reach out and say, Amy, I'm just afraid to even bring this up to my spouse, to even suggest that maybe we go to one of these. What would you say to that spouse?
First of all, some things to look for in their first responders, maybe hypervigilance. We all, as first responders, especially police, we have to sit with our back to the wall. If we go to a restaurant, we have to be able to see the door. But maybe even where they take that even further, on the hypervigilance and isolation. If they're starting to isolate more than what they were, if they're starting to drink more, intrusive memories, and then sleep. I don't know many first responders that sleep a good 8 hours every night and don't have nightmares or things like that. So that's maybe some things to look for. And then it's just, man, it's just having that conversation. It's okay to ask. What I hear people say a lot is, do it for our family, if not just for you. Do it for our family. We're worth it. Ryan Arthur, he does an exercise at our retreats. He's a Columbus firefighter. He said, what would you do for one of your first responders? If a floor fell in and during a fire and they go to the basement, so what would you do to get them out of that life-threatening situation? You would do anything you possibly could, even putting your life on the line to help that fellow first responder. What are you willing to do for your family? What are you willing to do when your family's struggling, when you're seeing these signs to step out and go to a free 3-day retreat? It's not asking a whole lot.
Yeah.
But but they also need to know though that they need to lean in if they come. We tell them that first day, if you don't lean in and you're wasting your time unless you're willing to say, I'm going to lean in this weekend and I'm going to really take this stuff in and participate, and that's where they're going to be benefit from it. But your family's worth it. You're worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. You just said, do it for our family. Aren't we worth it? I mean, that's powerful.
Yeah.
At least can't they give you, to your point, a 3-day all paid retreat,
Yeah.
right?
And you'd put your life on the line for another first responder. What are you willing to do for yourself and your
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Mick. I have learned so much today from you. I'm so appreciative of the foundation that you built. I'm saddened for the loss that you had that brought you into this, but I do feel like God had a purpose for you in that, and you are living that out. And I'm just so thankful for all of our first responders that they have a place to go as a first step to say, hey, I need some help. So I just cannot thank you enough.
Thank you, and thank you for bringing awareness and just all that you guys are doing as well.
Absolutely. Do you have any final thoughts?
For the first responders, man, there's people and organizations out here ready to stand guard while you heal. We're out here and we're putting in the work, and we want to stand side by side with you. But you got to be willing to do it. People will call me and say, "Hey, can you call my husband?" No, I mean, he's got to want to do this. Now, if he calls me, I'll talk about the bridge all day long. But
Yeah.
they got to want it. They got to want this, but it's worth it. This is a short life. Let's live it. To the best we can.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me.
I hope you walk away from today's episode feeling like maybe there is hope. Hope that your loved one can process the trauma of the job so they can go back to just being your spouse. Join me on this journey to help our loved ones overcome the mental health effects of the job that impacts them daily. Let us say a quick prayer. Our Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this resource. Thank you that we have an opportunity to go and get the help that we need with First Responders Bridge. Lord, we pray for all of the first responders out there that they would be open to hearing more about retreats like this from their spouses, that they would be open to going and giving it a chance so that they can help move some of this trauma through their brain.